Thank you for such an inspiring session, Catherine. My name is Elizabeth Palmieri, and I'm a senior English and History double major with a Rhetoric and Composition minor and certificate in Business Fundamentals. I am one of the co-chairs of the Conference Planning Committee, and this year I've had the pleasure of organizing our keynote session. I'd first like to introduce our keynote speaker, Carol Donovan Juel, Executive Vice President, Chief Technology and Operating Officer at Synchrony. Carol graduated from Holy Cross in 1995 with a classics major, and she is now responsible for building Synchrony's technology and operations strategy, including the company's focus on end-to-end technology and operations solutions that create seamless customer experiences, driving how the company will operate and modernizing engagement with millions of cardholders. During her more than 25-year career, Carol has played a significant role in the development of innovative Synchrony solutions for its partners, customers, and employees. She is also responsible for continuing to evolve new ways of working, including the company's agile approach to promote speed and drive innovation. Moreover, Carol is an advocate for career advancement, especially supporting women in technology. She helped Synchrony join the Marshall Plan for Moms, a movement to center mothers in their economic recovery and value their labor by advocating for policies that support moms. She was appointed to board chair of Girls Who Code, a nonprofit helping to close the gender gap in technology. Further, she is the executive sponsor of the Synchrony's Girls Who Code Summer Immersion and Club programs, and she serves as the executive sponsor of Synchrony's Women's Network. Carol has received several accolades by American Banker as a most powerful woman in banking standout in 2021, an influential woman in payments in 2016, 2017, 2023, and 2024. By the National Diversity Council as one of the most powerful women in technology in 2021, and finally by Orby as the 2019 CIO of the Year. Next, I would like to introduce our moderator, Kerry Ann Sullivan. Kerry Ann was also a graduate of the class of 1995, earning a Bachelor of Arts in History with a focus on American immigration and Italian studies. Her love of people, community, and story led Kerry Ann to a career in real estate. As she often says, every house tells a story, and strives to help her clients find a match for the next chapter of their lives. Indeed, Kerry Ann has spent the past 13 years at Pardee Properties in Venice Beach, California, representing more than 500 clients and achieving over $800 million in sales, consistently ranking among the most trusted and respected agents on the West Coast. She also coaches and mentors real estate agents, helping them grow their purpose-driven and sustainable businesses. Altogether, Kerry Ann combines her expertise in real estate with a commitment for helping others. Now, I would like to ask you all to join me in welcoming Carol and Kerry Ann to the stage.
Good morning, everybody. Carol.
Good morning.
Good morning. We were just here a couple months ago for our 30th reunion.
I don't know how that's possible.
I know.
It's not. The years are going, but we're actually not getting any older.
We're not getting older at all. Don't worry. First of all, I just want to thank everybody for coming. Thank you, Carol. It's so fun. Tell us a little bit about your first Holy Cross experience. What brought you to Holy Cross? Some of the memories that you have.
Let me just shout out to you. Not only are we classmates from the amazing class of 95, we were also floor mates on Wheeler 2 our freshman and sophomore year.
I said, who would have thought we would have been brushing our teeth? She said brushing her teeth. I said showering. Freshman year to know that we'd be sitting on stage, and she runs like one of the biggest banks in the world.
30 years later, this too shall be you.
Yes.
So I'm excited to be here. I wanted to thank the wonderful committee that puts this event on. I think you all know it does take a village to organize and orchestrate an event like this. So thank you to all the amazing women who support this. And it is just so special to be back on campus and just spending time with you all. I think sort of my Holy Cross experience, I think, is very similar to others. When you set foot on a campus and you immediately have that spark, that's what happened in the fall of 2019, 1990, I guess. And that was when I really knew that this would be the place for me. And then obviously when I joined the class of 95 in Wheeler, it became just an amazing experience and a place that I really attribute to so much of my fundamentals of who I am today, how I've evolved as an adult, and my desire to continue to pay it back. I'm also a current trustee of the college, which has been one of the biggest pleasures of my life, to have the opportunity to give back and support the college in such an important way. The trustees for many of the students in the room are probably a little bit invisible to you all, but they're a big part of how the college operates to drive the success that we have for providing amazing education, a world-class education for all the students here and the faculty.
I have to start with this. Classics major.
Yes.
You are the recruitment poster girl for how to be a classics major. Who would have think that a classics major would turn into a CTO? What made you get into classics? When you entered Holy Cross, did you think you were going to be a classics major? I'm so curious about this and how it translates into technology.
All right, this is one of those how much time do we have stories, but we have a lot to talk about, so I will try to be brief. Are there any classics majors in the room? Oh, yes. Oh, amazing. There's not a lot of us, but again, classics is similar to so many of the liberal arts. I mean, going to a strong liberal arts college, I fundamentally believe, and I sit here today, consider it to be the best foundational education for the world we live in today. So when I came to Holy Cross, I declared a classics major. I went to Boston Latin School, which is actually the oldest school in the United States. I always joke it's 1 year older than Harvard. Founded in 1635. We all joke that Harvard was invented because they had to find some place for the Latin school kids to go. And Latin was required for 5 years. I took it for 6. And I had this really influential teacher in my junior and senior year who said, college is about studying that you love, studying something that you love, and that challenges you in those foundational things you will learn: critical thinking, analytical skills, writing, debate will come through in any subject that you want to master. So I took that to heart and declared a classics major coming into Holy Cross. I spent a lot of time on Fenwick 4. I was teased a little bit by my friends because they're like, what are you guys actually doing up there? At the end of the day, it really helped me. Again, I studied something I loved. I engaged in the college in a really unique way. And I think the translatable part, and I think this is so important for all of us when we think about, as you're going through your academic career and your work career, you're collecting skills as you go. There are things you are learning, and you have to be really reflective. Okay, what is this doing for me now? And how can this apply in the future? And I think for me, I also took a good amount of math. And for any of you that know Latin or Greek, they're inflected languages, which means the words can be put in any order because every noun has case and every verb has tense, and they mean the same thing. And then when you apply the logic of mathematics to that, it's actually very similar to computer programming. So that was my pitch in the spring of 1995 that was helped to be crafted by the career office here. So I remember coming in, Kerry Ann, I was telling her this story, a Friday afternoon in the fall, and I was really like, I gotta find a job. Like there is no alternative for me coming out of school with loans, et cetera. Like the workforce was where I was heading. And so I sat down with Dr. Winters, who was the head of the career office. And it was the luck of the draw. I walked in, I put my name down. He came out, called my name. And I was like, okay, this is feeling good. I'm getting like the big guy here. And he helped me like rewrite my resume in a way that highlighted the skills that I had that would be transferable to employers. And it was in that moment of discovery around, here's what I know, here's what I've done, and how do I reflect this in a way that it will make me stand out in a way that someone would say, classics major, no way they could work in business. And then obviously I had to then prepare the elevator speech, because all of a sudden you sit down in an interview with someone, they're like, so you've been studying Latin for 4 years and you think you can work here. I mean, it doesn't come out quite that way, but, and it seems to have worked.
That's so good. And then what activities did you do at Holy Cross that have translated outside of the school?
You know, it's interesting when I look back on my time here, we choose to spend time with organizations. And I think at the time, you're not always cognizant of why. You're drawn to certain things. We as humans have desires and needs that we, either through social circles or things we get involved in. And looking back on it, it wasn't until I answered this question a few years ago in a different setting where I realized like there was it's almost like a through line in what I did at Holy Cross. So the places where I engaged, I spent a lot of time with the student program for urban development, SPUD, which I know is still existing here, volunteering in schools that were under-resourced, which is a large portion of the schools in Worcester. So I remember spending time at Quinsigamon Elementary, working with students one-on-one with reading and writing, and that was a big part of my volunteerism. I also spent time, and at the time, my roommate invited me to do this, and I was a little nervous. There's an organization that still exists in Worcester, a social services organization called Abby's House. And Abby's House, I see folks shaking their head in the room. For me, it was a new experience because it is basically a shelter, an emergency shelter for women and children that are fleeing domestic violence. So at 20 years old, that was something that I didn't appreciate, understand, but knew that this was a need. And they were under-resourced, and so the social workers could only stay at the organization. I think they were only paid up till like 8 o'clock. So they needed volunteers, and I don't know if this is how it still works. They needed volunteers to stay overnight. So we would go at 5 o'clock, and from 5 to 8, you would work with the children, help them with their homework while the moms would be getting counseling or help or whatever they might need. And then at 8 o'clock, the social service workers would go home, and Adrian and I would be in charge, mainly just to like make sure that like if anything happened, that anyone that rang the bell at night, things like this. I mean, we're 20 years old. I'm like, I look back on this. It's sort of like those people when I was like 12 that like let me babysit their infant. I'm like, what were they thinking? And then the other place that I volunteered was at the Mustard Seed, which is the soup kitchen in Worcester. So clearly there was a social service, men and women's for others sort of vibe that I had, that until I looked back on it over time, I didn't actually realize where I was picking to spend my time really was core to who I was. And the interesting thing, can I give you one more story?
Please, I want them.
Okay. So the Mustard Seed is an organization in Worcester that was founded by Holy Cross alum. That's the only thing, and there was always staffed, and obviously it is a soup kitchen social service organization that I'm sure in this current environment is over extended and needs a lot of help for anybody out there that's looking for an organization. But if anyone saw the most recent Holy Cross magazine, one of the founders of the Mustard Seed was profiled. And I love the work that the college has done with the magazine to really make it be about the stories of alum. And it was amazing when you read his story, and he had a co-founder who has passed in the last few years, but it talked about, how he saw the need at the time in the early 70s when there was so much happening in this country between the Vietnam War and many things. And interestingly, how this ties to my family, he had heard there's a woman named Dorothy Day who was the founder of the Christian Workers Movement, and this alum had heard her speak, and she started working during the Great Depression. So this was the early 70s, so she was on in years, but she was sort of an activist during the war. He heard her speak at Worcester State College and really said, I want to do something, and rallied people at Holy Cross to start this soup kitchen. Interestingly, I didn't know that story at all. My family and I support a local soup kitchen in Danbury, Connecticut, that's called the Dorothy Day Hospitality House. And so little did I know the connection between when I was, 19 years old at the Mustard Seed to where my family and I volunteer and make sandwiches for that shelter, because their mission is they will feed everyone, but they want everyone to leave with their next meal. So everyone leaves with a brown bag so that they will have their second meal if they are, or they will bring it to someone else that needs it.
I love that. I'm going to skip ahead a moment just because this through line that you're pulling up of this service, You are involved with so many volunteer organizations, and you've tied in your career to these volunteer organizations. And this Girls with Code I find really, really, really interesting. So would you tell everybody a little bit about Who Code? Because I know that's really dear to your heart, and it sounds like your service experience at Holy Cross, you've just lived it throughout your life.
Thank you. This is another passion problem.
Yeah.
Passion project that's helping to solve a problem. I think there's so many nonprofits out there that have noble missions, but when there are ones that actually are solving a problem that can be solved, there is a significant challenge in gender gap in technology today. There are not enough women in technology jobs, any number of, everything from, developers to AI to testers. And the problem is the pipeline has been leaky for years. The data has proven if you ask middle school girls, 70% of them will have an interest in technology, science, and engineering. You ask that same cohort by their junior year. So 70% say, yes, I'm interested. By their junior year in high school, that falls to 20%. That is a precipitous decline. And so what is happening is the way these subjects are taught in school, the way the environments are not as open and welcoming to girls and non-binary students as well. And so Girls Who Code is an organization that was founded 13 years ago about how do you help close the gender gap in technology. And what we're finding is it's not aptitude at all, it's environment. And so how do you create spaces where girls can form bonds through programming, summer immersion programming, clubs, any number of places where they can find common connection and build what we call that sisterhood, because the environments are not as welcoming to girls. My own personal experience, when I was a senior in high school, I walked into an AP computer science class, and I was the only girl in the room. And at that time, I just was like, yeah, not sure I want to do this. So I opted out and took AP physics. And I always joke, because a couple of those kids I've seen at reunions, and I say to myself, I'm doing a little better than you. But it's that idea that oftentimes as women, we will be the only in the room. And so this idea of service, paying it back to my profession to try and help others that are making their way, creating the opportunity for people to thrive. Not only is it a noble mission, it is a requirement. When you think of the jobs of the future and what we need as a society and as to remain competitive in so much of what we do, it is a really important cause.
I think that is, what I love is that you're just following your passion and you're serving your community as you go. Now let's go to a little bit of your career, because what I also thought was really interesting when we were talking was the environment that you had with other women in technology at GE to then when you moved, changed jobs, and there weren't a lot of women there. So how did you cultivate, and how are you cultivating your environment with where you're working now based off of your experience?
This is sort of everyone's career has chapters. So I started my career working for Accenture, and it was great. I learned a ton. Consulting is a great starting point. It is interesting now because they are now led by an amazing woman who is one of the most powerful women, Julie Sweet, in business. But at the time when I was working there were so few women. I worked in an organization called Northeast Financial Services. There were no women partners. And I stayed 9 years, and that was one of these concepts, this idea of, and I'm sure we've all heard it, if you can't see it, you can't be it. And I sort of was like, there's no women partners here. Like, I could probably fight my way there, but I'm not sure I really want to do that. And so I had this opportunity to join industry. So I took a job at GE Capital. So I spent 9 years in consulting. I took a job at GE Capital. And at the time, there was a ton of investment. There was a ton of investment of women in technology. And so I joined industry thinking that was just a consulting problem. The lifestyle's hard. Once you get married, you're probably on the mommy track. All the things back in, the early to mid 2000s that were still common. And I think they do still happen to an extent today. And so I had this really interesting time where ignorance was bliss. I was at GE. I was doing all this great work. And at the time, if you worked for GE, it was such a big company. You were always sort of taught first to look internally first. If you needed to solve a problem, there was probably someone in the General Electric company that had solved that problem. So your network was built internally more than externally. I worked for some very senior women in technology, working my way up to, 2010, 2011. I was then working for a female CEO. GE was one of the first companies to launch ERGs, employee resource groups focused on women development. But there was just a ton. So I felt like, wow, this is what industry is like. And I was like, this is really, really interesting. Then all of a sudden, the stark reality hits again. That was like literally like the Disneyland of employer relations and sort of the focus on inclusion in the workforce. So coming out of the financial crisis and leading up to 2012, 2013, the business I was working for, which was the U.S. consumer lending business, we went through an IPO, which we can talk about in another question, and we had this opportunity to take this company public out of GE, which was a tremendous opportunity from a career perspective. Loved every minute of it, but then one of the things I needed to do was really strengthen my external network. Because all of a sudden, you sort of spun out of GE and you sort of kind of like, it's like you're getting divorced. Like you can't really call them for help anymore because you're not one of them. Not that I haven't gotten divorced, but I'm just saying it sort of felt like that. That's what we would say at the time. And so I had to begin building my network externally. And so this was 2013, 2014, tech was having a heyday, financial services, payments, there was so much happening. And I would go to these events and I would walk into these rooms and I would be like, where the hell are all the women? I was blissfully ignorant for the prior 8 years that I thought the problem was being solved. It was just being solved in the company I worked for. In the broader environment of financial services and tech, it probably was about the same as when I left consulting. I was shocked. I was angry at myself because I actually was unaware. I was like, man, I'm doing all this great work and I haven't been paying it forward enough. So that's where at the time Girls Code was being founded, that's where my passion was to help solve that problem. So I got involved just as a corporate sponsor. So I started just sponsoring classes of girls that would come on campus in the summer, high school girls, and we would teach them and we would build these, environments for safety and support. And then that sort of led to the development of women in tech initiatives. And so I felt so much passion to help solve the problem because for a while I was doing nothing about it because I didn't know it was there. I was actually, frankly, I was embarrassed at myself.
So tell us a little bit, to go back to your career in the companies, how did you jump to all of these different positions? Were they jobs that you aspired to get to? Were they jobs that just fell in your lap? Were they something that were created for you? How did you get to these different transitions? And I know that the IPO was a big one for you, and that's where you are with what you're creating now.
So I think early in your career in consulting, you sort of you work with teams of partners, et cetera. So at the time, you sort of hitch your wagon to a few folks, and if you work really hard, they'll pull you along. So I think early in your career, I think for me, it was always willing to take on they'll call it like the career experience, the bubble assignment, the little extra thing, like those opportunities to stand out beyond your job, I think are important early in your career because they're opportunities to learn. And many times they're opportunities to actually demonstrate leadership skills. I think of all the women in this room that helped put on this event. Those were opportunities to demonstrate leadership skills. The previous speaker was talking about how you make sure your skills show up on your resume. All of the 10 of you that worked on this, when you're writing your resumes, you better put this on there and explain what you pulled off and how you did it. But those are things that grow your skills over time. When I moved into industry at GE, it was a meritocracy at the time. So there was a ton of, you work really hard, and you have opportunities. So I was growing my career, but I joke there was a time, both of my two transitions of really big jobs happened at the most unexpected and probably the least optimal times in my actual personal life. So in the spring of 2010, I was about to give birth to my first child, and I got a call about a job. And this was still at GE, just coming out of the financial crisis. Things were pretty rocky. Federal Reserve was in GE Capital. It was a tough place to be. For those of you guys were in a long time, I don't know, kindergarten. But the great financial crisis for anyone that was in and around New York City it was a reckoning of many things in this country. And so businesses were changing dramatically. And so I was expecting my first child, and I got this call like, hey, we would like for you to consider this opportunity. And I was like, about to have a baby. That's the opportunity. Like, but tell me more. And it was, we need to build out this governance and risk and compliance organization within technology. We really need to, there was a whole bunch of things that had happened, Sarbanes-Oxley and SOX controls, but broader controls across financial services companies, and how do you build that rigor into large operationally complex parts of the business. It's a job that's going to be, you're going to get to build it. You're uniquely qualified with your consulting background. You're going to get to hire people. You're going to get to build this. It's like, okay, and then they keep, we really think you're the right person. So finally I stop and say to it was a woman on the other end. I said, Julie, you do realize I'm about to have a baby any day now. And this was March 9th, 2010. She's like, no, I do realize that. I said, okay, and you do realize I'm going to take maternity leave? Yes, I do realize that. I said, and you really are, and you need someone to take this job. She's like, I'll wait. I mean, there was no saying no to this woman. And so I said, how about this? How about, let me have this baby. And from when the baby arrives, I will call you back within 2 weeks. I said, because God willing, this baby is going to be fine and everything. But at this point, I don't know if I'm coming back to work. So could I just have 2 weeks, please? And she said, sure. And so I hang up the phone, I cry, and then I call the two people in life that always give me the right advice. And so I call each of those people, and they're like, Carol, this is a great opportunity. Like, you're being asked to do something that the company needs you to do. I was like, you're right. I said, but I was just looking forward to like having a baby and going back to a job that I actually know how to do with a boss that I know. I'm like, there's a little risk in this. And so, sometimes you have to take risk at inopportune times. And so I then sat back and said, wait a minute, I get to build this. And the other thing, if I take this job, I get to promote the person I've been grooming for my job, who is like ready and then can take care of my current job, sort of seeing the career development for someone else. And so I was like, okay, I think I'm going to do this. And so my son was born the next day on his due date, March 10th. That's the only reason why I know this call was March 9th, because I remember he was born the next day. So 2 weeks later, I called Julie back and I say, I'm in. And then I said, but I am taking maternity leave. She's like, fine. So I come back. It was a really brutal job, but I figured out how to do it. But here's the thing. When the big job opened up 15 months later, which was the big technology leadership job in the consumer business, no one would have thought I would have been even competitive for it. But this 15 months of work that I grounded it out and I learned and I figured out what we needed to do, the people that were applying didn't realize that I was like the candidate. I didn't know this either at the time, but someone told me afterwards. And so then I got the big job that I wanted, because sometimes you have to take the job that you don't think is your next career move. You always think, I think this is next. Number one, if someone's asking you to do something, there's a need. They're asking you because they see something in you that they know you can do. And as women, sometimes we question ourselves, set that inner critic aside and say, okay, what do I have? Can I do this? The other thing I always say, you're not marrying a job. Like, it can have an end. You got to give it a shot. And if it's a new job that the company needs, you're going to get the resources. So that was a big one for me to like take that big leap. And then that sort of became sort of the rest is history. Like, that was the critical one.
What I love is the bravery of about to have a baby, your first baby. And the women in here who've had children know there is nothing more powerful than the energy of a woman about to have a baby.
Oh, yes.
I've seen it. I have seen women 9 months pregnant, buy, sell homes, move 3 kids, change school, like everything. There is just that energy of what you need to do and the clarity.
Yes, exactly.
The clarity that came to you, I just find that so fascinating, and then just gave you that bravery to take something that you weren't expecting, weren't planning on doing, but you just had a baby. Like, what's harder than that?
Exactly. Like, you just birthed another human. Like, you birthed, I'm like, I could do this job.
And then you had twins.
Well, then, yes. So then,
and
then
another new job.
So yeah, yes. So my husband keeps saying, you can't take any new jobs because we're done with having kids. So then obviously I take this job and it's getting bigger. And at that time I started working for this phenomenal woman who ended up being my boss for 11 years. And so I did the job, or going through it. And then obviously the decision was made to take the consumer finance business public. So we were a very easily severable part of the General Electric company. But at the time when it was like a Fortune 175 company we were taking out of GE, and we were going through an IPO. And so I had twins who were born in February of 2013. One of them is sitting right here, I see. She's embarrassed. And so we had our twins, and I'm home on maternity leave, and my boss calls, and she would call to check in on me like every Friday as she was driving home from work, because I had recently lost my mom and I had twins, and she just wanted to make sure I was doing okay. So I pick up the phone, and I always say these phone calls are those like life-changing moments. You always know your spouse and your boss from that first interaction, whether or not this is like a good call or a bad call. Like I can tell my husband's like, hey, Carol, versus hi, Carol. Like, is he mad or not? And same with my boss. So I picked up the phone on this Friday afternoon. It's Margaret. And I could tell this wasn't a business. This was not a social call. This was a business call. And I was like, oh, dear God. I'm like, she just got some big job. She is leaving. She's calling to tell me she's not going to be back here when I come back from maternity leave. And so like my mind is going, holy shit, I got to get my resume together. Creating a story. I've got 3 kids under 3. No, she's like, Carol, we always knew it was a matter of not if, but when. I'm like, what is she talking about?
Gosh.
Like, what? And I'm like, I got one baby in an arm. I'm rocking the other in the bouncy seat with my foot. I'm like, what is she talking about? She said, we're taking the company public. It's an IPO. We're starting the work right now. You're going to be back to work in 6 weeks, and like buckle up and get ready. And oh, by the way, you can't tell anyone. And so I was like, okay, I think that's, and so she was literally just going through the list and calling all of us on the management team. So I hang up the phone. I look down. Cecilia was in the bouncy seat. I'm holding Henry, and I'm like, well, looks like mommy's got a really big job. I don't know what this means, but so I came back to work to lead like the largest financial IPO post-financial crisis, build the tech foundation. It was the hardest thing I've ever done with 3 kids under 3, like nursing twins. Like it was crazy. Like I look back on it and I'm like, I'm not sure how I did it, but there were
power
moments
of a woman having a baby.
Yes, times 2. So maybe
times 2 this time. So if you had triplets, can you imagine?
Oh, dear, yeah. But I think the moral of this story though is you might feel like, okay, I'm sitting up here saying like I just keep like, you feel like you're flying high. That job had some really big lows. Like really big lows, because when you're doing like these really big things and you're doing well, and as a woman, you're like, well, I just have to keep it up because no one thinks that I don't want to show any cracks. I just gotta, we just gotta get to this milestone. We gotta get to that milestone. We gotta get to that milestone. And so I went back to work in June. By like Thanksgiving, which would have been like 5 months later, I was literally falling apart. Like my hair was falling out. Could have been the nursing thing. I don't know. My hair, I was like, I wasn't sleeping well. I was like falling asleep, driving home from work. And I just was like so stressed. And so I was like, I got to do something. I was like, I can't, like, this is not like something's going to happen. Like the company is counting on me. My family is counting on me. So I did like I was like, what do I do? What do I do? So I sat down with my husband and had a crucial conversation. And I was like, I'm about to fall apart. Like, I can't do this anymore. And what was so interesting, he lives with me. We sleep in the same bed. Like, he had no idea.
Oh my gosh.
None. But I think it's the message that like, you can't hold it all in. You have to share what you're feeling and experiencing. And this idea of like, I can do this. It's great sometimes, but it can be really, really your own worst enemy. So we sat down and I said, we got to figure this out. Like, we got to figure out like who's doing what. We need a different division of labor. I said, the company really needs me to do this. And if done well, this will be potentially game changing for us. But like, if done poorly, like there's a lot that could go wrong. So like we had to balance. And so we went through the list of like things that we do and things that we don't do and what can we just stop doing. Like I had already given up on like a clean house and like laundry, like that had gone out the window. But I'm like, there's like some fundamentally other things that we have to. And so there are some funny things in this, and C can attest. So at that time, he took up grocery shopping. So I just divested myself of grocery shopping. He did all of that. He also did all of the ordering of baby products. At the time, I don't know if anyone in the room knows the precursor to Amazon Prime was something called Amazon Mom. And it was an online baby and diaper service. He was the first card-carrying dad member of Amazon Mom, which then became Prime as they got through the like subscription business started taking off. But to this day, I am not allowed to grocery shop because I buy the wrong things or I spend too much money. Isn't that true, C? Mom doesn't shop. Yeah, dad, like I'm not allowed to go. So I didn't know back in 2013 that I would be finally out of that business. But I think the story though, Kerry Ann, is like, you have to talk to people, whoever they are, your boss, your colleagues, your partner, around what you need. And as you grow your career and the complexities come in with stress and stress, with every opportunity comes stress, and you have to balance things out. And my husband was so willing to have the conversation, but he had no idea that there was a problem. So I always say, especially in corporate environments, I always talk to folks saying, like, people aren't mind readers. Your boss is not a mind reader. You have to say and be willing to talk about what it is you might need or what's going on or what you need help with. Because once you put it out there, 9 times out of 10, someone is going to respond and be willing to help.
Thank you for being so vulnerable, because I think that's one of the hardest things is people to ask for help and to talk.
Exactly.
And then you've also talked about this as part of your leadership is you just listen to people. So there's something about we can listen all day long, but if you're not sharing yourself and making it a two-way street, then it doesn't work. So what I also thought was so impressive was when we had a meeting to talk about this keynote speech, her right-hand woman who was on the Zoom was literally feeding her baby in a high chair.
Oh,
And the fact that you can cultivate that kind of environment in the company that you do as the CTO, that she felt comfortable with a baby in a high chair just feeding her snacks as she's like womaning this meeting.
Oh yeah, baby Val, she's amazing.
That's so impressive. And I just think that that's a testament to what you've created with where you are. And so could you tell us a little bit more about the mentorship and leadership style you have at the company? Because you're now in the ultimate position. So now you are really setting the tone. And I think that's really impressive in the fact that you've asked your husband and you created it, you started that way, being vulnerable to this point where now your right hand feels comfortable being able to feed her baby on a Zoom with you, the CTO of the company, her biggest of bosses.
Yes, Jamie's amazing. I think as leaders, you have to, we're all human. And in every organization will have culture. I mean, any place you join, any organization. And so culture is created. It is also destroyed. Like, you think about companies that have created culture, companies that have destroyed culture. And at the end of the day, with the work that you do, it's the people that matter the most. The work is going to be the work, but it's the people and how they organize and how they think and how they're led and how they talk and engage with each other. So, companies that build great and strong culture, all the studies have proven over, any number of Harvard Business School studies show that the performance follows. So you build a strong culture, you can actually have a strong performing business. There's a direct through line of correlation. But how you do that isn't easy. It can't be just like things you put on the wall. It can't be just, all of a sudden you measure things. You actually have to create the environments where people feel included. And one of the most important things that I believe in is really a core to our company is listening to people. Yes, I'm up here like yapping a lot, but I do a lot of listening. And listening is where you will hear those things that you need to listen. And you actually have to listen actively, not just so someone can get their peace of mind out, but so that they're telling you something that you need to hear. I always say you can't surround yourself by people that tell you what you want to hear. You need the people that are going to tell you what you need to hear. That's why you have to get out in the field. You have to talk to everybody from a frontline worker to your colleague, and then try and connect the dots. And as a leadership team in my company, and it was started by my old boss who retired a number of years ago, listening was a huge part of that. And then not only just listening, but then how do you take that into action? Because it's one thing just for people to feel heard, but how do you take that input into the changes that you're driving, things that you need to do to support your employees, what you need to do better by your customers, and all of that comes together in a really unique way. There's one thing I didn't share with you on our prep call, but I think it gets to the listening. So for all of us that were in the work environment during the pandemic, it was really, really hard to be, actually it was hard to be anybody during that time. Let's just be clear, like that was just a hard time in humanity and for our lifetime. I hope none of us ever have to experience that again. But to be a working parent during the pandemic for the spring and summer of 2020, there was so much uncertainty, obviously health, businesses, layoffs. I mean, it was a pressure cooker. And for all of us that had kids at home that we were trying to keep educated. And so, my kids the twins were in first grade, my son was in fourth grade. And so like we were doing our best, but it was not easy. I remember, I have a memory for dates. It was the Friday of Memorial Day weekend. And I was having virtual coffee with my boss. And she's like, Carol, you must be so excited for like virtual school to be over. I'm like, no. I'm like, what the hell am I going to do with them this summer? Like, at least school kept them busy a few hours a day. Like, there's nothing. There's no summer camps. There's like, so I'm like, for working parents, I'm like, this summer is going to be a nightmare, especially if you live, I mean, in the Northeast where I was. I mean, the restrictions were really tight and people were, trying to live by the restrictions. And she's like, I didn't even think of that. Again, her kids were older. She's like, I didn't even think of that. She's like, what are we going to do? I'm like, I don't know. What are we going to do? And so in that moment, I said, but we have to do something. We have to help working families for this summer. And I said, we were like batting around ideas. Like, I'm like, could we create like a virtual summer camp? She's like, why not? She's like, how would we do that? I'm like, I don't know, but let me just think. And so we have a culture at work that is like agile. If anyone knows, agile culture is like test and learn and try. It's a development methodology, but can be applied to any number of business practices. I'm like, we could probably get a team together of people to think about like how we could help keep kids busy this summer. And she's like, that's great. She's like, let's get that started. I'm like, okay. So that afternoon, I drafted a few people. I'm like, hey, we got to go out and listen to working parents and find out what they need. But maybe we could come up with this virtual summer camp. And so literally by the weekend, we had this proposal. And it was, well, obviously, you got kids under 12 that have nothing to do. You've got high school kids who aren't getting their first jobs. No one's lifeguarding. No one's scooping ice cream. No one's nannying. You've got college kids who don't have internships. So you've got this whole bunch of like stuck people. And oh, by the way, we have a big culture of philanthropy in my company. We have a whole bunch of employees that have no place to volunteer. I'm like, so we've got like 3 sets of customers here, all who have problems that I think we could solve with a summer camp. So what we did is we created the kids were the campers, the basically like junior high, high school and college kids were the counselors, and then the employees were the mentors. And so what we did is we gave the high school kids the opportunity to design courses. I mean, they could teach anything they wanted. And so they could teach anything from like gymnastics to calligraphy to video gaming, anything. Like, what do you love to do? And can you curate a class so you can host virtually to entertain children for periods of time during the summer? So we created Synchrony Summer Camp, which actually took off. Like it was in Time Magazine. It was all over these places around. We serviced that summer like thousands and thousands of kids. But what we also did is we gave these, teenagers something to do with purpose. And we gave employees this opportunity to help those. So you got to mentor an employee, because we obviously could not have like, 15-year-olds like with children that were unsupervised. Like there were lawyers involved in this. But obviously parents had to trust us. And it was like, when I think of things that I am most proud of during the pandemic, that was one of them, because we helped parents get the relief they needed. Kids learned a lot, but there was like these wonderful little like glimmers of hope. So for those teenagers, they built a relationship with an employee at the company that may or may not know their parent. They were just getting assigned someone that had time. So they built the relationship with another adult that, oh, by the way, ended up being an adult who was writing them college recommendations. It was an adult. And the other benefit was those teenagers learned more about the company from these other adults than they ever actually asked their parents. But it was just one of those moments, like when I say like culture is built, like those were those culture moments where we just had to do something, and we did. And then you look, you could measure, and I'm an operations person. You then measure the productivity during the summer, how much work got done because kids were, yeah, that's great. But at the end of the day, like we brought joy to people's lives in a really hard time, and kids learned things, and teenagers got skills, and adults felt needed. I'm like, that was just really special.
I see, look at you with your leadership and your service, tying it all together. I want to ask, I'm going to pivot just a moment because we have a lot of students in here. what your advice to them if they want to get into the technology world is. And I want to put a flare in there because it's in everybody's background. There's a lot of fear that is being spewed out about AI and the elimination of jobs. And I know that a lot of people want to get into technology, but now they're scared because there's not going to be jobs because of AI.
Okay, this is another talk we need to do,
Yes.
Kerry Ann. But and you've got a tech leader on stage, and we haven't talked about AI in 45 minutes, which is almost unheard of.
Yeah.
So I'll give you because we want to open it up for questions. I'll give you my short version on AI. AI is a societal shift. This is not a technology. This is a shift that's happening. You all are seeing it. You are living it. Everything that is this big and this unknown creates fear. And fear, this is Carol's view, is often created by those who want to own it and control it. That's just the reality of just, if you look at things in society, you look you're a history major, you look at how things have changed over time. And I think we're at that moment. So what you need to do is just need to set the fear aside. Yes, you have to use it. You need to use it with good judgment. You need to use all the rules, but the fear of it, you need to set aside. It is going to become part of how organizations work, how people learn. 30% of search today is done with generative AI. So search is moving. I mean, things are changing, but I believe there is this human approach to this that many companies are taking, and that AI can be an augmentation to jobs today. So I know in my organization, there are parts of everyone's job that they hate. Everything from a contact center worker that hates to write notes at the end, if you can automate that through AI and they read it and said, yes, I talked to the customer about these 4 things, check, you can focus on the part of the job you like. If you're a developer, technology will always exist. How you do it will change. But developers hate to write unit test cases. It is the shittiest part of the job. If you can use generative AI to do that work, you can focus someone on the more highly valued work, which is really important for the company. And so you have to view it as augmentation. All of these jobs are going to change. This was similar when the internet came 30 years ago into the workforce. But what you can't do is just sit on the sidelines and be fearful of it. You need to engage in it. You need to learn. And then you need to be, what I always say for anyone entering the workforce today, the 2 most important skills you need, and for anyone in the workforce, is curiosity and resiliency. You have to be curious about what's going on, and you have to be resilient because the amount of change you will go through in your career, it's hard to even imagine today. And resiliency is just that, learning from what I know and adapting to what's coming next. Those are amazing skills. And women are really good at this. We are curious by nature. So lean into that as you're looking and talking about jobs and roles. And then the resiliency is just picking yourself and dusting yourself off. We've all have to build that muscle, and then it just becomes part of how you grow your set of experiences.
I love that. So resiliency and
Curiosity.
Yes. I love it. Is there any other pieces of advice that you'd like to offer everybody before we do open it up for questions?
The last one I didn't learn until I was too old. The motto of Girls Who Code is to be brave, not perfect. If I had known that in my 20s, so bravery is way more important than being perfect. Just put yourself out there. No one expects perfection. But when someone shows up brave and ready to do the job, that is pretty badass.
Well, I mean, you did that. You're so impressive. And to think from a classics major, a dead language to the language that keeps on going.
Exactly.
Right?
From a dead language to AI. I know. It's crazy.
It's really impressive. I'm very, very proud of you.
I'm proud of you. Thanks,
Thank
Kerry.
you. Thank you, everybody. Does anybody have any questions for Carol?
Hi, Carol. Thank you so much for being here today. I loved hearing about your background in volunteering, and it sounds like we've spoken a lot about empathy, and it sounds like those extracurricular activities came from a very empathetic place. I was wondering, at the beginning of your career, when you entered these overwhelmingly male spaces that are fast-paced, did you still feel like you could express that? or did you feel like you had to change your behavior and change how you presented and worked in the workplace in order to fit in?
Oh, this is such a hard question. I think you have to be who you are. I think the workplace has changed tremendously over the last 30 years. And if you are in a place where you don't feel like you can express who you are, you might not be in the right place. I know that sounds kind of harsh, but if you're in an environment that's not letting you, be empathetic or ask questions or be the person that you are, that's probably a really hard place for you to thrive. If you are there right now, if someone is in that environment, I empathize with you, because that is really hard. Like, if you are being told just to fit in and go with the flow, it's going to be hard for you to be successful there, because that's not being true to yourself. I do feel like workplaces have evolved a lot. And I think this is through many things that have happened over the last number of years around, inclusivity. Diverse teams drive better results. However you want to feel about DEI as a political statement, but the idea that the diversity of thought, and that could be, I always joke, I could have something more in common with a Black colleague that grew up in a similar section of New York City to where I grew up in Boston, to a white colleague that grew up in rural Alabama. Diversity of thought varies so widely. And so I think when you're entering the workforce, understanding where you feel comfortable, and if you're in an environment where you can't be who you are, I think you should start to look around.
Thank you. Can I just ask one more quick question?
Sure.
So you were talking about your time at GE, and you said, quote, "It was a meritocracy at that time."
Yes.
Could you specify why you added that qualifier?
Well, GE has changed a lot. So it had some really tough years. And so it is back on a good trajectory. I think it is, I don't know if it's a meritocracy anymore. I'm not there. At the time that I was there, it was very much, and by meritocracy, it was, every year the bottom 15% was managed out. There was just this constant sort of culling of the herd. So you were always striving to get to the next level to sort of, and that may have not been the best culture. That was sort of the Jack Welch to the Jeff Immelt days. It's a different company now, and it may be, I just don't know for sure.
Thank you so much.
I know.
Hi, I'm Mara, and I'm from the class of '94. We're of the same vintage.
Love it.
So I love the threads of philanthropy that you've talked about, and I wonder if you could comment on why you've said yes to Holy Cross. And also, I'm 53, and I've been lucky to be, if not all, most of these conferences. And the keynote speakers and the access for students is truly phenomenal. I just wanted to comment on that for students who are much younger than I, on how unusual and special that is for Holy Cross. It's tremendous. And if you just go and look at the list of keynote speakers, it's truly phenomenal and represents an unbelievable generosity of your time for busy people. So thank you for being here. And thank you for the student organizers too. But I really would love for you to comment as a trustee, especially on why it's so important for students and young alumni to say yes to Holy Cross, and why it matters. What does philanthropy back to Holy Cross look like, perhaps, why it's so important, and even if it's $5 on Giving Day, why we desperately need that saying yes to Holy Cross to continue this special recipe that we have.
Thank you. I think I fully recognize, obviously I've got 3 kids who need to go to college. The cost of a college education is immense and bordering on unaffordable in this country. It is an escalating cost. So I do fully appreciate the sacrifices that families make to send their kids here. And we are so blessed to have the amazing students that we have. That said, the cost of tuition does not cover the full cost of an education. And so alumni, and we do have a very generous alumni, this idea of supporting the college as you leave. For me personally, it was Holy Cross gave so much to me. I was a kid that was the beneficiary of financial aid. I was a kid that had the work-study job in Kimball. I did all the things here to do my best, and I felt this tremendous sense of give back. The concept of the Jesuits, to whom much is given, much is expected. I think that's really important. And I do think philanthropy, however you see it as you leave this college, is it your time is because you don't have the means, or over time giving a little bit, because that connection to the college does matter. Your ability to help someone else have the education and experience that you had is really important. This is an amazing institution, but it is also important that those who have had the benefit of what is so special do give back in a way that will help future generations. I mean, we as alums are so blessed to see the amazing students that this school produces. I mean, it is, we always joke we wouldn't have got in if we had to compete with you guys. Like, the standards were lower back then, let me be clear. And so, like, just that idea of you have had this opportunity, I encourage you to think about what philanthropy means to you. And, I joke, like, my school, when I graduated from Boston Latin, even when I was at Holy Cross, I sent them $10 a year. I don't really remember doing this, but I remember going to an event and someone stood up and said, these are the kids in the class that have been giving. And I was like, oh, wow. But it's just, like, that idea of giving a little bit, it shows that you recognize how important this place was in the formation and development of who you are. And then over time, if your situation changes, find ways to engage. It could be in, supporting something that's important to you that you can work through the development office to support. It doesn't, you don't just have to write a check and forget about it. Sometimes we want to be purposeful in where our money goes, and there's many different ways to support the college. I just encourage you to think about it over time, because I think you guys know, not all places are like this. We have something really special here.
You mentioned when we were talking before about connecting with fellow alums as well. Can you talk a little bit about the connecting aspect of it? Because I think that's really important as well with the philanthropy.
And so this is, we all have our connections from Holy Cross. Like, the group of friends we have here, I hope you've found your people. If you haven't yet, keep looking. They are here. And they will go with you into the world in ways that you don't even imagine. They're the folks that are the first ones to call when someone in your family dies. They're the ones that show up when your kids, you need them. And I think then also, as you go out into the world, you will meet other Holy Cross alum that you don't know, but you will, just because of that connection, you will have something special. So there's an amazing woman who's been on this stage before. Her name is Ann Fink. She's a former trustee. She's a very high-powered woman at PepsiCo. And I was at Fortune's Most Powerful event a couple weeks ago. It's a networking event in Washington, D.C., and she was there. And so there was like a little app. So I sent her a little note. I was like, hi, Ann, I don't really know you, but we're here together. We're both alums. I would love to have coffee. She's like, I don't know you either, but you're speaking at the Women in Business Conference. I was like, oh. I was like, the fact that she recognized my name, and then we just connected, and but those Holy Cross connections, they are powerful because of what we have created here, the sense of community, the sense of belonging, the way we are all woven together in the mission of the school. It carries well beyond the hill here. And then as a trustee, I feel reaching out to others in my class and in other classes to help them find ways to find their way back to the college. Sometimes there are folks out there that might want to engage but don't know how to come back. And this oftentimes, is where our folks in development or other parts of the college might say, hey, do you know anyone that knows this person? Would you be willing to have a conversation with this person? So there was a classmate that I didn't really know, but I knew he was someone we would like to engage at the college. So I just set up time with him. And I said, I just would love to hear about your experience. Like, what's your experience like? He has 4 kids, they're a great family. He's a really interesting guy. And we just talked. We just had coffee and we just talked. And then I said, is there any way you would like to be engaged? He's like, I'm not really sure. And I sort of put something out there. And then all of a sudden, I then sort of worked the magic back into Michelle Gagny and the team. And all of a sudden he's like engaged with the college. Like, those don't happen all the time, but like, those are those moments as someone who has loved this school, who's worked as a trustee, like, to try and make those connections to bring people back to the college that have skills, that have the ability to help, that want to help, but sometimes don't know how. So I guess my ask to this group is, as you continue to build your network beyond the hill, like, folks that are not in your class, folks that you meet in other places, they're equally going to be as all in for helping you with your career or getting to know you. Leverage those connections. It's really important.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions?
Hi, I'm Julia from the class of 24. So for everyone in this room who's like a junior level at a company, or everyone who will be an entry level employee at a company, and especially as women who may not feel as empowered, how do you navigate advocating for yourself and your ideas while also managing and navigating hierarchy and politics at a company?
It's a delicate dance. And I think you have to understand sort of the culture. And so obviously everyone's hired to do a job. So you obviously have to, understand the job that you're doing, but also we hire people because they're smart and they bring interesting and new ideas. So you have to find the right balance between, okay, I'm doing this work, but I have some different thinking about it. And so I think, you have to find, is it the right place to, start by talking with your manager about, hey, we're working on this, but I was wondering, what do you think about this? Like, so you can offer advice or open-ended questions to kind of get a sense of like the culture. Like, is this a place that is like, hey, we do it this way and they're not open to ideas? Or, wow, that's an interesting idea. Why don't you go back and think about that and come back to me with some thoughts? So I think you have to balance obviously, if you're working any organization, there's goals, there's objectives, there's things you need to get it done. But at the same time, every company, in my view, should be open to new ways of thinking. I mean, that's why you bring people from the outside. So we do our hiring of new hires through various programs. We have something called the Business Leadership Program, which is similar to many companies where you bring in entry-level employees through programs in summer and then full-time. Like those kids on campus, like I love spending time with them because I learned so much. Like that is where, first of all, those are the kids that always win all the hackathons. They win all, they have all the great ideas, but they're a sounding board for what do generational shifts, how different shifts are happening, different perspectives on work. So much is changing in the nature of work in the last several years, and everything from like how we work to where we work to what work expectations are. And I think being able to bring those ideas to the forefront to the company where you are is going to help that company be a better company. You just have to find the right places. Sometimes it's in other, like joining an ERG or joining a group of folks that are working on something. The other one is volunteering. Like if people are looking for hey, we want to work on something, raising your hand, because that's often a way to get new ideas into the ecosystem for, it could be like whatever they call it, like a task force, a tiger team, whatever it might be in your company. Like those are always great places to test out new ideas.
I love it. Brave, not perfect, curious and resilient. And now you have to go be your mom. Time to go to a soccer tournament.
Yes.
Go team.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Kerry Ann.
Thank you so much, Carol Donovan Juel, for those inspiring remarks. We're now going to transition into the next portion of our program. Networking will begin and our breakout sessions will start shortly in the designated classrooms. Please feel free to grab some refreshments, connect with one another, and make your way to the session that interests you the most. They start at 11:30, so you guys have some time. Thank you, and we hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.